In today's episode of the Platform Presents podcasts, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Marissa Homere, and she's sailing over as the VP of Marketing at Irwin. And at Irwin, they're really looking into all things investor relations. And today we want to really jump in what that really means, who they're serving, how Marissa is thinking about growth for the company, and a little bit about her journey as a marketer as well. So Marissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Give us a 360 overview. What is Irwin all about, and what is, investor relations? What does an investor relations software do?
Yeah, so Irwin is an award-winning investor relations and capital markets software company. We're based in Toronto, Canada, and we are a Series A funded startup and growing every day. We have thousands of customers around the world and service companies in many different industries at many different market capitalizations. So investor relations is the function within a publicly traded company to manage shareholders and acquire and target new investors. They're also generally responsible for AGMs and earnings within those publicly traded companies, investor roadshows, communications, corporate development, sometimes depending on the organization. So investor relations is a vital function of any public company. And so as a software provider in this space, basically we enable our clients to have an easier way, a better way of managing their investor relations programs through a number of product offerings that we have. One being investor targeting, so the ability to find new investors and discover sort of untapped capital. Shareholder monitoring, which is the ability to monitor your current shareholders and their positions, and we actually have the most comprehensive view into your shareholder base through a variety of tools like publicly reported data, retail data, and stock surveillance. And we also have our CRM function, which is kind of like the bread and butter of our platform, which is a CRM that's pre-populated with over 2 million investors, as well as public filings of all of those investors and stock positions, as well as research estimates and transcripts, which is the ability to see your analyst coverage and competitive transcripts from earnings calls, which can be great insight into your competitor. So that's kind of a very quick overview of what we do.
Yeah, it sounds like a very well-rounded package, but also a very, very specific persona, right? Like in comparison to a lot of other products, it's very specific on a very particular function. In a very particular company, it has to be publicly traded, so that it makes it very clear like who is actually benefiting from the software. Now I'm curious, like how do these, investor relationship managers, how do they hear about Irwin? Like what's a typical journey for somebody of getting started?
Yeah, we're actually in kind of a unique position because the space has a number of incumbents that are they have a ton of brand equity. They're very well-known names. So it's actually one of our biggest challenges is, just letting people know that we're here. And so typically from a growth perspective, we'll meet someone at an event, we'll do some cold outreach, or they'll find us via a piece of our thought leadership content through LinkedIn is really popular. And yeah, so generally speaking, there's not one definitive way that people find us. Word of mouth is starting, obviously for a company our size. It's a little bit harder, especially when there are, 20 plus year relationships with the incumbents. That can be hard to change the dynamics of those relationships. But there is a couple of ways that people normally hear about us. The primary one would probably be our own outreach and presence at investor relations events and things of that nature.
Very cool. Okay, so what role do you think the website plays? Like, how do you, as a marketer, because typically, the marketers that we have on the show, they're super critical about the website. So, what role does it play, you think, in the journey of getting to know Irwin?
It's really interesting because I come from a background, I worked at a website and marketing agency for years. And in my last role, the website was kind of like the center of the universe. I think it's a little bit different in this instance because there's not a ton of organic search for what we offer in general, very small discovery rates via the website, I would say. So our website kind of really does function as an explanation of what we do and kind of like a mechanism for people to get in touch with us, more so than a discovery element, which is different than anything I've ever worked on as a marketer. But we do have to, it does mean we have to find new ways to engage people because they're not necessarily just going to find us.
Yep. No, that makes it makes a lot of sense. And what would you, is that, if we're then talking about inbound marketing, which obviously has that element of them somehow finding you guys, what is something maybe that you envision that you're excited about for the future for Irwin in that regard?
Yeah, I think like because our community is and our prospect base is like so well defined, that gives us it's both an advantage and a disadvantage in some ways. But for inbound, it's a huge advantage because there's a real opportunity for us to become a trusted source of information within our community. And I think we have excellent founders who are very smart and very present and have their own networks, which also helps. From an inbound perspective, I think what's exciting is the opportunity to have a real share of voice within our community and have a presence that's thoughtful instead of just volume based. So that our inbound connections are not only, the typical kind of shorter sales cycle, a little bit more expensive, but they kind of fall into this relationship building exercise, which we're able to do through, our presence at events, which is also not something that typically works for a lot of marketers, but it does really work in this community. And our presence on LinkedIn, and our contribution to things like the Forbes Council's articles have also been really good for us. And yeah, just like becoming a trusted source generates inbound for us more so than any kind of request a demo based advertising could ever do. So that's kind of what I'm excited about, is not only the opportunity to, help grow a really exciting business, but to contribute to something meaningful that is going to help this community who doesn't have a ton of resources outside of a few key associations that they can join. But I always say, like, as a marketer, if I ever have a question about anything that I'm looking to execute, I can Google it and I can find someone who's done it before. This community doesn't necessarily have those resources. So to be able to become that, I think is not only really gratifying from a growth perspective, but also just meaningful.
Such an interesting position because typically, obviously, we have a lot of marketers in very overserved, like content-wise, overserved markets and personas. Yeah. So this is super, super interesting. Probably going to be what that Slack community or whatever community will be sometime down the line. Very, very exciting. That's a very exciting position. Cool. It's rare to find these days, I would say. No, like
I know. Trust me, I know. It's really gives you the opportunity to build something different and to make an impact, which is very hard to find in a world where everybody is constantly overserved information at all times. It's nice.
Very cool. You mentioned you've been working in companies prior in the marketing agency world where the website has been front and center. Maybe tell us a little bit what you've learned, because a lot of marketers we have listening to the show, they're always looking to find ways to maybe increase a conversion here or there, or to figure out how to better build a page. Is there something that you've learned? Any methods, tools, approaches over the years, not necessarily just with Irwin, that you find and consider to be very important when it comes to optimizing the website for conversions?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've been part of the strategic and execution of hundreds of enterprise websites. And I think like something that often just gets lost, especially when you talk about conversions, it's just like the usefulness of the website. Like, are you speaking in their language? Do you have things that they actually want? And is it based on more than just your assumption that you know what they want? or is it based on talking to that group of people? So I'm a big proponent of strong and process-driven information architecture from the beginning. So the labeling and organization of your site definitely makes a big difference in conversion. And then just not being married to it is another thing. Like, things need to change over time, and using A/B testing tools and really understanding how website analytic works, whether that's through something like Google Analytics, or whether it's through something like Oribi, which is another one that takes a more human-centered approach, I find, to the analysis of website behavior. Can help as well. I think we have like this analysis paralysis view of web properties, which is like A/B test everything, and only 3 form fields or only 7 form fields. But oftentimes, I think when you really think about it from a user perspective, people don't necessarily care about that. They want to be able to access the information that they want, to have enough of that information available to them, and to have enough value to give you their information, or money, or whatever it might be in the first place. So I think that it's a complex topic. It's a really important one when you talk about conversion, and definitely depends on the context of your business. But I think user-centered experience design, and that's things too, like, all websites start to look the same and everybody focuses on design, but content is actually like a website is only a house for content. So if you don't actually focus on your strategy for content and understanding what the person on the other side of the screen is looking for, or what's valuable to them, your conversion rates will never exceed expectations.
I mean, I think it's a very fantastic summary of what I think is going on at a lot of places. I think you touched on some very, very profound points there. Appreciate it. I want to switch gears a little bit, because we learned about what you guys are doing, how you're thinking about growth and conversions on the page. Now, I have some rapid fire questions to get to know you and your journey as a marketer a little better. At first, my question would be, before we actually go into the rapid fire ones, because there is so much content out there for marketers. Quite the opposite to your target persona. There's a lot of opposite content for marketers. How do you filter? Like, what's your go-to strategy to, I don't know, maybe focus on certain sources, experts, channels, Slack channels? What do you do?
I think in recent years, I've become a really big advocate for community, and Slack groups are one big part of that. I think now, although some of them, they can get quite large, they become less and less valuable over time. I really like Dave Gerhardt's DGMG community. I think that's a great place to have actual meaningful discussions with other people who are in similar positions, and to get quick feedback on things too as well. There's a couple of key people I follow on LinkedIn that I think are always a trusted source of information. But like, when it comes now these days to blogs or specific publications, half of it is like kind of useful. Half of it you think is going to answer your question but doesn't. So community has always been a good filter, I think, for me, within those Slack groups, or DGMG, for example, is a good way to filter out the noise and find things that have actually been useful to the community that could be useful to me as well.
Makes a lot of sense. I have some rapid fire questions to wrap it up for today. You ready for those?
Ready.
What's the last book you read?
The last book I read was Atomic Habits.
And what's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Branding, I think, is a big one.
If there would be no boundaries in technology, everything is possible, right? What's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
The one thing I would fix, I would make CRMs easier to use from a data perspective. Simple. Here's my question. Here is the answer I can get, and I can get to it in less than 5 minutes instead of 6 people and 12 hours later.
What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
It's a good question. I think just what's next, like, where can this go? I think I don't think I would be a good marketer if that didn't keep me awake at night and ideating constantly.
Mhm. And for the very last question, if you allow, we will do a little bit of time travel, right? We go basically back to your formal education. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Algonquin
Algonquin.
College. Algonquin College. Yeah, my German background gives it away. Um, what's the one advice you would give yourself? So you offer to the world of marketing now from formal education. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
That's like a deep question.
Mhm.
I think if I could go back to my college age self, I would tell myself that I'm stronger than I think I am, and I can get through more than I think that I'm capable of. I think that's, as a woman and ascending to leadership over time, I think that's something that I never gave myself enough credit for. And I think it's something that would have probably helped me at that point.
I mean, it definitely will help. I think some of the listeners listening to the episodes, I really appreciate Marissa taking the time to be a guest on the Platform Presents show. I want to give you the very last word, right? If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Irwin today, what's the one thing that they should remember?
I think that we have a wonderful team and group of people at Irwin, and I think like that's the foundation, and that's going to be the foundation of our success is the people that we're on this journey with, including our customers and prospects, and we really value that as a team, and I think that that's super important.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Platform Presents.
No problem. Thanks so much.